Welcome to our Friday Torah study. I'm your host, Sholiach Moshe Yosef Konyuchowski, also known as Mr. Fig Tree by some. I don't know. Someone gave me that weird moniker, and I accept. I certainly accept that. It's. I would assume that would be some kind of a compliment. She said, I've been sitting under your fig tree for a long, long time. And I guess that's why she considers me to be Mr. Fig Tree. So I guess you're talking to a fig tree. Boy, we had a mighty, mighty time of deliverance last night. Sister was fully set free in many, many ways to be all she can be in the Moshiach Yahusha. When, by the way, you were just disconnected, so just reboot your page, okay? Just reboot if you get buffering or whatever you get, just reboot that. And so she was truly set free last night. Our deliverance team came and we were received with open arms. And her husband was very supportive. He's a good man, a kadosh man, and she's blessed to have him be there to see her deliverance through. So we want to give Yahuwah kol hakavod for what he's done in deliverance ministry last night. Very powerful. And for people in our community who are allowing the Ruach to completely cleanse them so that they're free to worship Yahuwah without chains holding them back, and literally entering that abundant life of Yochanan 10:10. Let's see what we got. Diana says, awesome. Welcome, Diana. Welcome, Aliyah. to the broadcast, Colette, Yochanan, Benjamin, the Dornans. Don't forget, please, be used by Yahuwah and just invite people to our live broadcast. So every Friday, we're going to be coming to you with the elder Bob Korn from the Beth Tefillah congregation in Queens. And so without further ado, welcome to Corn and Fig, the Friday edition of Corn and Fig. And we're going to bring up the corn part at this point. Boker Tov, Elder Bob. And what does Yahuwah put on your heart in terms of discussion, sharing from the Word? I know the Ruach always has something for us through you. So I'm just going to turn you loose. I'm going to have a little coffee and a little water. And if I interject, it's because one of the listeners is making a comment or maybe asking a question. So, Boker Tov, Elder Bob, Boker Tov.
Boker Tov, Chavarim. It's good to be once again with you. It's once again a privilege and honor to reach out to all of you who are abroad and who you are close, to you, those who are near and to those who are far, even as Brit Hadashah has been offered to those who are both near and afar, to bring us all together, to bring us all closer by the magnificence who is the eternal one Elohim, Yahuwah. So we give him praise this morning. I do have something that I've had on my mind for the past couple of weeks to share.
Please.
And I can certainly do that.
We're hungry. Everybody's hungry. We're listening.
Okay. I wanted to share something from Psalm 119. If you can all turn to Psalm 119, which is one of the true miracles of the Devar Elohim. It is a miracle because it is a poetry on a level that is unparalleled. The Hebrew letters separate each section. There's 22 letters of the alphabet, and there's 8 verses dedicated to each of the letters. Each section, say the Aleph, each verse begins with a word with Aleph at the beginning. So it's an acrostic. But it is done in such a magnificent way, in such a coherent way, that it is simply magnificent. And one of my the favorite letters that I love, given full understanding, is the Dalet, which would begin at verse 25. And Dalet is one of the true important letters, and you can't have an alphabet without any of the 22. So they're all equally important, just as man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from Yahuwah. So, but Dalet is always very important because of the words that come forth with the Dalet. The word for judge is Dan. The word for knowledge is Da'at. De'ah, rather. The law, decree, is a dat. The path, the way, is derech, which is an important word because the New Covenant believers were often referred to as haderech, the way, the path of righteousness. The psalmist tells us derech emunah. We're going to see that actually in this section of verses, the derech emunah, the way of truth, the way of faith. And it's interesting also that the Dalet is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and just as the 4th commandment is the commandment of the Sabbath, it reminds us that Dalet, the pictographic image of the Dalet, is that of a door, and the word for door is Dalet. So it is the same word. So the letter D and its pictographic imagery is always that of a door. And the 4th commandment being the Sabbath, the first mention of Shabbat in the book of Shemot is in the 16th chapter, verse 29, in which the children of Israel were to remain indoors and rest on the Sabbath. So the first mention of Shabbat has to do with being indoors, within the doors of the safety of their home, where they would not be tempted to work or do any extraneous actions. Mm-hmm. So again, the Dalet, the door, is a very important concept to understand the beauty of his words. I'm going to start reading from verse 25. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's why you're here.
25 to 32.
Go ahead.
word. And the first word is davka, which is my soul, is the clinging, the action of the clinging. The nefesh is clinging to the dust. So this first verse is a desperate cry in a state of being alone, loneliness. My soul clings to the dust, and it's a cry for Yahuwah to revive us, to give us life, chayini, restore life to us according to your word. So the word is an essential part of this. The devar is part of that reviving agent to bring us out of the dust, out of desperation, out of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And the next verse begins, I have declared my ways, not your ways, but I've declared my ways, and you answered me, teach me your statutes. So the idea of declaring our ways is to declare them inadequate. As we cling to the dust, our ways are without purpose. And daracha is the word to describe our ways. Our ways are inadequate. But you answered me. You've given responded to me, to my cry for to be revived. And I cry out for you to teach me of your statutes. And that's what gets the ball rolling with regards to the recovery. In verse 27, again, the word derech, the way, is the first word of verse 27. But make me understand the way of your precepts, so I shall meditate on your wonderful works. So again, the growing attitude of make me to understand. I cling to the dust, revive me, a cry out according to your word. I've declared my ways, and you answered me, teach me, make me. It's a cry for the eternal Most High, Yahuwah, to respond to us and to help us in our efforts to respond to him in the proper manner. Make me understand the way of your precepts, so I shall meditate on your wonderful works. There's a lot that we've yet to learn. We don't have it all figured out. So help us to understand. Create within us the ability to comprehend, to fully understand your ways, the ways of understanding, the ways of your precepts. I shall meditate on your wonderful works. As a result of that, verse 28, my soul melts from heaviness. Strengthen me according to your word. So here's the pivotal moment. Our soul is melting from a heaviness. Dalfa, it is the melting of nafshi. My soul is melting from a heaviness. Strengthen me according to your word. Strengthen me. So our soul is melting from the heaviness of this world, of the situations that we're involved in. So it's a cry again for him to strengthen us according to that word that initiates this portion, that we be revived by this word. Okay, so strengthen me according to your word, according to the promises. And there are many, and they're all basically there to push us onwards, knowing that he is faithful. Okay, so strengthen us according to your word. Verse 29, remove from me the way of lying, and grant me your Torah graciously. Now this is an important, very important concept here. Derech, again, derech, shekar is the way of restoration. Rather, remove from me the way of lying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, remove the way of lying and grant me your law graciously. So this is an interesting concept right here, because it is Torah chaneni, which is the law and grace combined. Grant me a Torah through your grace. So there are those who are still debating about law and grace, but here, remove the way of lying, of nonsense, of foolishness, and grant me through your grace, your Torah, your words, your understanding, your application of wisdom. But first you have to remove the way of lying. You have to remove the way of religion, of foolishness, of things that are which is helping us in the very first verse to cling to the dust. That's why we're clinging to the dust, because of the ways of lying, the ways of falsehood. So that's what we have to do as Talmudim of Yahusha. We have to come away from the lies, come away from all the stuff that we've accumulated over the years. And there are many people who believe that we are the result of all this walk through their homes, their apartments. They can't even leave their sofas.
Oy
It's just
vey.
packed with newspapers and packages and
Oy,
boxes.
oy,
They're
oy.
hoarding and hoarding, accumulating and accumulating, and they have no reason why I'm holding on to this box. I have no reason why I'm holding on to this stack of newspapers from 10 years ago. I have no
Oy.
idea why I'm doing it. I have no idea.
But Bob,
I've just
Bob,
been accumulating
that's
this stuff, and it's the way.
that's
of the
Bob.
hoarding.
That's a
Remove the hoarding.
hold it. That's a situation, Bob.
And through your grace,
Bob.
grant me the Torah. Yes, sir.
That's a situation that cries out for deliverance.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's not something that normal praying or normal everyday walking with Yahusha. That is one area that is a stronghold. And see, there's a pardon me, there's a strong man there, and that strong man has to come out. So hoarding is bondage. It cries out for deliverance, and for those who are willing, there is deliverance. But to me, that's part of the deliverance ministry. So go right ahead. I just wanted to. So if you have a problem with hoarding, 1-800-DELIVERANCE. Okay, that's not something to be played with, like you were saying, because that shows that you have inordinate affections, and that your primary affection is not a Messiah, and that there are insecurities that are prohibiting your walk of trust with Messiah. I did a message a long time ago. You can find it on YouTube, and it's called "Get Rid of Your Stuff," and how getting rid of your stuff can be liberating and promote great growth and freedom in your walk with Mashiach. So go right ahead, please. Go right ahead.
We were reading just the other day about in the book of Acts when all the former magicians gathered all their accumulated stuff of wizardry and witchcraft and had this huge bonfire, if you will. And of course, we get these negative images from this, but this is in a positive way. And it was very expensive, and so ultimately, the love of money being the root of all evil, that this created a great uproar in the community. But this was proof of that bondage being broken. These things no longer have control over me, so they are going to burn. I'm not going to seek to sell it to somebody else. It's going to just be destroyed.
Man.
And that's another important part of letting go. It's not just a case of having something that's bad that you don't want to have anymore, you want to give to somebody else. No, you don't want to weigh down somebody else with these issues. So they need to go. They need to go, and whether they're burned, whether they're, toss them in the garbage, recycle, whatever. But get rid of them. Remove from me the way of lying, of this falsehood, and then you can grant me your Torah through your grace. I just thought that was such an important concept. Torah Choneni, your grace, the grace of your Torah. And again, we talked about grace and the law and all these different things. We have a better grip on these things than a lot of people who think that these are diametrically opposed from each other. And it's such gross darkness that does that. And again, for them to understand this, they have to pray that they are unburdened by this hoarding spirit, so to speak, the way of lying, all these denominational positions which have no bearing in the scriptures whatsoever, but they're just accumulated result of our religious hoarding. And we have to say, get rid of it, and please grant me. It's a plea for Yahuwah to give us his Torah graciously. Through his grace, he gives us his Torah. And it's so clear to see that there's no conflict here. In fact, Psalm 119 is the amazing love psalm of the Torah. And then he goes on to say in verse 30, I have chosen the way of truth. Your judgments I have laid before me. Okay? Derech emunah. The way of truth I have chosen. Okay? I'm asking you to remove from me, to grant to me, to strengthen me, to make me understand. Now I have chosen the way of truth. So this is all part of that growth. The evolution of this psalm, this portion of scripture, is showing the progress that can be made. Of our own volition, we have made a choice. We have surrendered. Your judgments I have laid before me. We talked about the other day with him. Yahuwah has given us the way of truth. What else is there? You know, when Mashiach was being abandoned by all those who were, out for free meals or whatever, he says, "You're going to leave for me also?" And Simon Kippur says, "Where am I going to go? You have the very words of truth. You are the truth, the way, the truth, and the light.
Hallelujah.
Where else would we go?" So I have, of my own volition, chosen what you are taken what you have offered to me. Grant me your law graciously, and I have chosen that way of truth, and your judgments I now lay before me. They are the path, they are the derech. The derech, the way of truth, is laid before me. That's the road, that's the path that is illuminated.
Hey, Bob, Allison says, yes, that's true. Clean out your physical home and your spiritual home. Amen.
Yes.
So true deliverance will help you see all the junk you are keeping. So she likens the hoarding unto the cleansing of our temples, that both are required. And there's the physical connection to the fact that we need to have our temples dedicated to Yahuwah and cleansed of every bondage and every double-mindedness and every recurring sin that does so easily beset us. So that's a good point that she was making.
Yeah, Chanukah. It is the dedication. We need to dedicate. And of course, this is not talking so much about material things. This is talking about unloading of ourselves. Remove the way of lying. Remove not just the physical things, but the things, the religious things, the psychological things, the philosophical things that come into conflict and contrast with his ways. And we have to make that choice of our own volition. I have chosen haderech emunah, and your judgments I have laid before me. That is what initiates that derech emunah, that we have allowed that to be laid before us. And then the next verse is in contrast with verse 25, where in desperation and in our loneliness we cling to the dust, and we're crying out for revival and for life. Chayini, we're crying out for life. So here, I cling now to your testimonies. We're no longer clinging to the dust and emptiness. We're clinging to the testimonies of Yahuwah. O eternal Yahuwah, do not put me to shame.
Amen.
And it's interesting when we think of the term shame. We are not to be ashamed of the gospel. We are not to be ashamed of our relationship with Yahuwah, because he will be ashamed of us. It's too complete a game. Do not put me to shame. And he's not talking about somebody poking fun at us for believing what we do. He's crying out, I cling to your testimonies, and as a result of that, we will not be put to shame. It's not that Yahuwah is either going to do it or not putting us to shame. He will not put us to shame. Do not put me to shame. And then verse 32, I will run the course of your commandments, for you will enlarge my heart. And here we see this put into practice. The course of your commandments is now to be run. And in the process of it, as we know that when we do exercise, it accelerates our heart rate, it helps the blood flow better. And in this case, it increases our heart. It enlarges our heart. We are to have large hearts. We are not to be stingy. We are not to be selfish. We are to be part of the way that gives, not the way that takes. And that's what the world is doing. That's the clinging to the dust. We're clinging to that which we can take with us, as opposed to giving of our lives away, in which he can return us just as the bread, casting the bread upon the water, return to us within a matter of days, and it'll be enriched, and it'll be to our benefit. So I cling to your testimonies. Do not put me to shame. I will run the course of your commandments, and you shall enlarge my heart. So again, the course is the derech. The derech, mitzotecha. So it is the course of your commandments, the derech emunah, the way of truth, the commandment, the course, the way of the commandments. This is all part of that grace, that gracious gift of giving and bestowing upon us glimpses of his eternal ways. And as I said, this is a beautiful portion of Scripture that's like this beautiful island, a little oasis, and it all has to do with the doors opening. And as you mentioned frequently, that we as believers have to make sure that we keep certain doors in shut, and we have to keep certain doors and portals open and recognize which is the one that will benefit us and which of those that will not benefit us in the long run. And as I talked about the do not put me to shame, I was thinking of your Hebrew lesson the other day, Hebrews 2, verse 11, where it says, for both he who sanctifies and those who are being sanctified are all one.
Amen.
For which reason he is not ashamed to call them brethren. So again, this unity, this amazing, beautiful unity that again we see in Yochanan chapter 17, we see that throughout the scriptures, this idea of a unity, and we everyone is praying for unity, but it's unity as long as you agree with me, as long as you're part of my team. Not that I have to lower my guard and join your team. Somebody has to be calling the shots, right? So we have to have some overseer who shoots down everybody else. And I remember as a baby believer, there were a lot of people who were hurting in the spirit and not being addressed. And I remember the old saying is that the quote unquote the Christian army is the only army that shoots its wounded, that shoots those that are hurting, that abandons them. No man left behind. Well, nobody told the quote unquote Christian army that.
Wow.
And we need to be concerned about everyone within the body because we're irreplaceable. We're all part of this body where Mashiach is the head and we are the body. And also the cries we hear in this day and age, certain buzzwords like diversity. And diversity has some good aspects to it, but diversity is focusing on the things that separate us, that make us different from each other. And whereas we can actually use diversity as something that can benefit each other, but to wave that as a flag, as opposed to unity, the brethren need to be unified, not diversified. It's like Wall Street. You have to have your thing diversified, so you have it in 10 different pools instead of just one. But when we talk about our individual status before the eternal, we have nothing to boast about. There's nothing about us that is significant enough to be taken notice of simply because of the DNA that runs through our body, that's just unique among all creation that has ever existed. So I love that verse in Hebrews 2:11 because both he who sanctifies and those who are being sanctified are all one. And that's an amazing thing that I think most people skip over because it might make some feel uncomfortable. It might make some feel alien about this, or just skip through it. For which reason he's not ashamed to call them brethren. He's not ashamed to call us brethren. And we just read that from Psalm 119, that he would not be put to shame when we cling to his testimonies and when we are on his path of truth and faith, the derech emunah, and the course of his commandments, the path, the way of his commandments. It's just one constant redemptive thread from Bereshit to the revelation of Yochanan. It is all there. It's all the ingredients that we need, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, and we need a deeper understanding of the Word. And Hebrews is a very often misunderstood book, and what it says and what we're comfortable discussing or we're not comfortable discussing.
And Bob, it comes down, Bob, time out. It comes down to this. If you love him, he will cover your nakedness and your shame. If you're lukewarm, he may allow your nakedness and your shame to be exposed. So when we're in love with him, part of his job as our older brother is when we fall short, whoever believes on him will not be ashamed. He lovingly covers our nakedness, giving us time to cleanse, to heal, to be set free, and to lay aside the chet and the peshaot that so easily beset us. So that the more we run with him, the more in love we are with him, the more he covers us and we have nothing to be ashamed of. If we can't sing, we can worship. If we can't run, we can run the race of faith. So whatever our deficiencies are, because in our weakness, we are made strong. And that is one of those spiritual laws and spiritual principles that will kick in if we're faithful and we don't turn to the right and to the left away from the faith because we had a bad day or a bad month and a bad year. For it is written, he will never leave us or forsake us. So that's a very important point to make. So right on, dittos to everything you're saying.
Amen. That's why those who are going to boast in anything need to boast in Yahuwah, have to boast in the eternal, have to boast in him, because all things emanate from him. You know, we have no recourse but to acknowledge his sovereignty in all the matters. That's why Romans, the first chapter, is such an important part of Scripture. It's just so essential that we get a grip on his obvious qualities, which most people are totally ignoring, and the subliminal understanding that they know what's going on, but they just refuse to acknowledge and give thanks to the one to whom we must all give account.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead. Continue.
Well, that was the portion of Psalm 119 I wanted to talk about, and I just think it's so beautiful how it's all tied together with all this imagery of the Dalet, whether it's the door, whether it's the path, whether it's the melting or the clinging. It's all so beautiful, and it's so amazing that this exists in this format, that we have this beautiful little oasis that begins with desperation and ends with a thriving person. We're no longer in the dust clinging, but now we're running a course.
But this is
of his commandments.
Bob, this is hold it.
Our hearts are being enlarged.
Yeah.
Our hearts are being capable of ministering to others and loving each other by word and deed and doing what we're required to do.
In verse 29 it says, listen. In verse 29 it says, remove me from the way of lying. And I think that there are lies that hold believers back from walking in the grace of Torah and blood atonement. And then there are lies that don't really sabotage our faith. So there's still lies, and we know that S.A.10 is the father of lies. Okay, we know that. A lie is a lie is a lie. White, black, gold, silver. Okay, we're not justifying lying. But if you look at verse 29, because you were talking about Tehillim 119, verse 29, there are certain lies that are deadly. For instance, the first lie, if you eat of this tree, you will not surely die, right? As Yahuwah said. So he questions his word. And so because the word is questioned, or the word is not understood, or because the word is not rightfully divided, then lies come in that can cripple. Listen, they can literally cripple. Forget about the sheep. They can literally cripple the elders and the pastors and the evangelists. And one such lie I have been dealing with and repenting of, because I'm from the school that you and I were raised with, Bob, that the proclamation of the word is always coming through the mouth. Or we can try to be real spiritual and say, oh, no, it's not. It's by your lifestyle. No, but it's deeper than that, okay? It's deeper than your lifestyle. If we believe that children of Yahuwah cannot be demonized, then why would anybody seek to be free? They'll die with their hoarding. They'll die with their bondage. They'll die with their hate. They'll die with their anger, and all the while thinking that that is abundant life. So when we walk in the grace of the word and the grace of Torah, and this is a petition to me, understanding now what I understand, remove me from the big lies or the lifestyle of lying that is fed to believers. Because there are certain lies that are even come through the pulpit that will hold us back and stop us from experiencing abundant life. Yochanan 10:10. You see what I'm saying? And so we have to be quick to repent, especially as leaders, of believing, walking in the ways of lies that are big ones. They're crippling. Okay, there are lies like, oh, darling, your hair looks fine when it looks like you combed it with an egg beater, right? Okay, there are those kind of lies. And then there are the lies that actually stop people from being free. Your comment?
No, I agree. In fact, I think a lot of the problem comes from the pulpit. We see that in Jeremiah false prophets, the false priests, all these individuals who have claimed to represent him, and they don't. They don't represent him. So again, we are trying to help free people from the limited concept of who Elohim is. They've been painted into this little corner and told that this is your freedom. Just appreciate it. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. And Yahuwah has so much more for them. It's a shame that their growth has been stunted. And the growth of a true believer is limitless, truly limitless. And we just have to trust. We just have to trust, because this is who we are claiming to believe in. And he's got his word, which clearly portrays the truth. And one of the great obstacles is the pulpit, is what's coming from the false teachers. There's a lot of false teachers, and again, we're so busy pointing fingers at each other, saying this one is doing this and this one's doing that, and unless you're exactly like me, somehow you can't possibly be representing Yahuwah. And all this falsehood, we're wasting so much time and effort and energy, whereas we should be feeding the sheep, feeding them with the proper word, truly understanding and properly dividing the word, first of all, and working our salvation out with fear and trembling. These are the things that should be motivating us and helping us. Otherwise, we of all people are to be most pitied. What you were saying about, again, back to Psalm 119, remove from me the way of lying, because I have chosen the way of truth. That's part of that process. We have to pray that he takes things away, but then we have to take the choice and the volition to then take the way of truth. So many people believe in a passive religion, which is not the case at all. It's not the case at all. We are actively involved in this relationship. It's a covenant relationship. There's no such thing as any berit that was established through the years where the partners do not break. You don't make a covenant so much as cut a covenant. There's always blood that ratifies the covenant. And that there are two partakers of it. There are two equal partners. Again, as I pointed out with the tablets, I believe that that's two copies of the agreement. And just as when we make an agreement, when you buy a house or when you make an agreement, you have a copy, they have a copy. It's the same thing. So the standard is the same. And Jeremiah, I'm just having a hard time finding the location in this portion here, but Jeremiah clearly preaches against this type of stuff. People falsely, and the Lord says, if only they would listen to you preaching the word, and then they would turn away from their sin and be saved. So it's just a shame that there's so much false representation and people who are so gullible and desperate. Just like in this verse 25, my soul clings to the dust. I'm desperate. Revive me according to your word. And then we look, where is the word? Who is delivering to me the word? And as a result, we can get a lot of people falling into traps of people who show this false religious expression because they might have hooked a live one that might be a real generous tither eventually. Otherwise, they can't be bothered with them. But we have to be, if we're going to be preaching the word, and that includes everybody who's listening, we all have to be emissaries of the truth. We all have to have a certain measure. Yeah, there's an order and what have you. But each one of us has to be able to deal with these issues of our own personal accountability, even in life, secular life. The problem is that we're not taking personal accountability. And in my lifetime, and in yours also, we've seen the evidence of this decline and the slide away from Elohim. We've seen the standards drifting and slipping and sliding. All those people talking about all the wonderful things that were done at Woodstock, and it was just a self-absorbed time of a bunch of people get together and get stoned, and yes, there was some good music there, but what exactly was done? All these things that are turning points in the history from that time until now, where we're accepting absolute lunacy.
And if the
it's been accepted any time in the past, never.
If the preachers do not include the basics of the Torah, their gospel or the word starts at Matthew, Then look at verse 25 of Tehillim 119. The being will cleave to the dust. The dust nature will dominate in every area of your life that you don't turn over to the cleansing power of the word. So it's the word versus dust, or the dust nature. And the point is, to grow in Messiah means to leave more of the dust nature behind and take on more of his nature through the bathing in the Milta, or the Davar Yahuwah. So we see that connection right there. My being cleaves because the word is waiting to quicken me. But now, one thing I want to touch on, and I've touched on this many times, and I want you to comment on it, because this is an edition of Corn on the Cob and Corn on Fig, okay? Corn and Fig. I got to get the new title right. So here's something I want to make clear that my students need to understand, and then I want your comment on it, okay? Because someone sees something differently, we are quick to gossip and label them false teachers. Here's what I want to tell you. There are few false teachers who know Yahuwah. They mean well, and they're sincere. We have to learn and mature to differentiate between false teachers and a false teaching. For instance, you and I, over 30, 40 years, we can deliver 790 sermons. Out of those 790 sermons, 7 or 8 are way off base. And we don't know that until later in retrospect. That doesn't make us false teachers. It makes us true teachers subject to the areas of dust, human dust, misunderstanding, not rightfully divide. We certainly never want to do the devil's work when we teach or when we, expound on the word of Yahuwah. So I think part of maturity is, a lot of people, for instance, label me a false teacher. Why? Because I teach plural marriage. Okay, let's play devil's advocate now with the emphasis on devil. Let's assume plural marriage has nothing to do with the Torah. I mean, you got to be literally blind, but let's assume plural marriage has nothing to do with the Torah. So I teach 10,000 topics. I have over 3,000 videos on YouTube, and probably another 8,000 that I never put up over the years because there was no YouTube. And I'm certainly not going to sit there and transfer stupid old cassettes and transfer them to YouTube and do that for the rest of my life instead of doing the work of the ministry. So out of 790, or in my case, thousands of messages, I'm sure I gave 10 or 15 messages that were a little off base. Does that make me a false teacher? No. Even if I was wrong about polygyny, which I'm not, so we need to mature. There are teachers sent from heaven, but because of their human condition, they're going to have a few false teachings, as I have over the years, as any man of Yahuwah or woman of Yahuwah would have over the years. That's maturity, not to automatically label someone a false teacher because they believe I should have a gun, and I don't believe that a believer should have a gun, okay? You just label them and you call them a false teacher, blah, 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 and I don't want to have anything to do with them, because in one area they're wrong or you disagree. And the job of the devil is to have brethren that are in the same family, that are echad with the Messiah, focus in on the two things that they disagree with, and they become blind to the 10,000 things that they are echad with. That's how the enemy works. That's exactly how the enemy works. Your comments?
Well, I do see the growth, and I do see the progress that we make, but I'm also drawn to the scripture that talks about there was a time when Yahuwah winked at foolishness, but now he's calling us to account. So I would not say anything today that I'm going to be hesitant to deliver, because I'm still in the process of working something out. I wouldn't say anything that I have not believed and that time has not tested it to be true. I wouldn't want to, if I was going to talk about things, about the shape of the earth and talking about different things like that, if I believed in something that was contrary to scientific evidence, I wouldn't present it as fact and say this is fact, this is fact, this is fact, because unless I go around and take the tape measure and go up there into the sure of, I would either hold it back or I would present it in that light, because again, I'm sure that there's nothing horrendous in some of the things that have been said before, but we have to acknowledge the standard that he's given us and what the world is acceptable of. And my friend Michael is always pointing me to the book of Malachi, chapter 1. If you could look at chapter 1 of Malachi, verse 8.
Let's turn there. Everybody go ahead.
And the world has a standard, and the quote-unquote church, or churke, has a standard also. Okay? Look what it says in verse 8. And when you offer the blind as a sacrifice, is it not evil? And when you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it then to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Would he accept you favorably, says the Yahuwah of hosts? Of course not. But we think that, well, it's acceptable because, we're all flawed, we're all sinners, we're all this, blah, 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 blah. He forgives us, it's all under the blood, blah, blah. The standard of the world is you perform or you're out on your ear. And we don't believe in kicking people out of the congregation. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is that we kind of have two different standards of excellence. And I mentioned this once before, that in the world, you have your sports heroes. I use Michael Jordan. I know I'm dating myself a little bit, but I don't think anyone has surpassed him, despite what your LeBron James fans might say.
Right.
But
I agree.
Michael Jordan accomplished amazing things. Nobody went to the court expecting him to have a mediocre game. Nobody expected, and if he would have a season of mediocre games, averaging 8 points and 1 assist, he would soon be moved over to the next guy. We don't accept failure as the standard, whereas in the quote-unquote church, we look at, well, David failed. Well, look, Peter failed. He doubted. He was in the waters, and he doubted. He looked down. He was disappointed. Oh, yeah, and Peter, he went out and hung out with his Hebrew buddies. And we look at them. We look at that to prove that the path of least resistance is my path. Whereas I believe the scriptures, in the strongest terms, like we're reading in the book of Hebrews, is challenging us to do better, to go above, to go beyond, to go in just like with when Messiah told to Talmudim, he says, if a soldier asks you to take his pack and walk a mile, take it too. It's going to completely blow his mind because you're doing it of your own volition. You're not being forced to do it. You're going beyond. And so when I look at Malachi, I see you can see the voice of you can't see the voice, but you can hear the passion of this. So you're offering me poor sacrifices. You're going to offer this to the governor? I don't think so. I don't think your governor is going to be so happy with you, because there's a connection there. If we give it to the governor, we're going to suffer for that. We give it to the police chief down the corner. We might not have such great police coverage, or give it to the sanitation worker, and then we'll find how good our garbage is picked up in the mornings. It doesn't work in the world. Why do we think it's acceptable to Elohim? It frustrates me. So again, I'm saying a lot. I hope I'm saying something. I'm not disagreeing, but I am saying that we need to be challenged to do the best we can. And if there's still things that are working out, let's work them out.
Do the best.
Work them out. There's no rush.
Wait a second. Now, do the best.
We need to make sure that what we offer is pure, the pure milk of the word, accompanied with actions and accompanied with the ability to move in the sphere of the ruach, to cast out demons, to heal the sick. I'm waiting for this stuff to happen in my life, believe me. So we need to move in that sphere of understanding.
Right.
The eternal Elohim has so much more for us, and we're kind of just nitpicking.
Yeah,
there's so much here.
Well, you're saying, Bob, hold it. What you're saying is, we need to be excellent in our walk, in our offerings, in our lifestyle, to give Yahuwah our best, to always be the best, to strive for excellence, and to not make excuses. I got all that. But keeping it real. Shalom, Ashton. Shalom. daughter of Zion, went through a mighty deliverance. Hallelujah. All praise to the King. But if you look back, I mean, I think most preachers, if they're honest, I don't care if they're in the church or the Messianic movement, there have been things that we've said, we thought we studied, we were 100% sure when we delivered it, and we were 100% sure that when we delivered the teachings, that they were the right things to say, 100% sure. Now, in retrospect, looking back over the years, the honest man of Yahuwah has to repent. Okay, you're saying of not giving Yahuwah the best or not giving Yahuwah the most excellent, our best, fully agreed. But giving him the best and being excellent and trying and testing something before we put it out there, that's still within our human condition. We submit it to the Holy Spirit. So I think if we're being honest as leaders, looking back, okay, you've made mistakes. Now, at the time, you were sincere, you were honest, and you were striving for excellency. All I'm trying to point out is, and I agree with you, we need to strive for excellency and give him our best, not our leftovers, not our used furniture. So if we make a donation to the community, we buy a new sofa. We don't give Yahuwah the one that we're throwing out. I'm with you. I'm 100% with you. But the sad reality is, whether it's a marriage, whether it's our children, we're going to mess up. I'll give an example. What Yahuwah was showing me last night. I raised my children in the faith. They never saw me cheating on their mother. They never saw me doing drugs. They never saw me being out there rebellious against Yahuwah. I took my children to hospital visits. When I visited elderly folks in nursing homes, I took them with me. And now they're not serving Yahuwah. So what went wrong? I taught them how to do Shabbat candles. I taught them how to bless the challah. All right, on Friday night when we were doing night, we didn't realize that the day began in the morning. So I was giving Yahuwah my most excellent attempt at being an Abba, a father. But yesterday, when we had finished our session and finished our deliverance session, Yahuwah showed me what I was doing wrong and what I did wrong in my parenting. Now, it's wrong to say that I wasn't trying to be the most excellent father I could. I dedicated a lot of time to teaching my children the word and taking them with me on visiting nursing homes. I was not neglectful, but I didn't understand that they needed deliverance from Dungeons and Dragons and looking at warlocks and Ouija boards and experimenting with witchcraft and rebellion, drugs. So instead of casting the devil out of them, I did not step up to that responsibility because I thought that was a church performance, putting on TV. Oh, look at us. Ha, 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 ha. We can cast out devils. So part of my parenting was to remove unclean ruachim that came into my children's life. And yet I was striving for excellency. So I think you understand what I'm saying. Our human condition is something that we have to overcome. And when we overcome it, be quick to repent and move on in excellency. You follow what I'm saying? We could move forward in excellency, but all that has to be balanced with the human condition that we're overcoming day to day. Your comments?
Yeah, no, I have the same, many similar experiences in my life and in parenting and such. And yeah, I do agree with that. I do agree that we do grow and we make ourselves accessible to new things, and we do the research and what have you. I'm not talking about that. I was talking more specifically about the foolishness. And Jeremiah chapter 33 was what I was looking for before.
Go ahead and share that. Go ahead and share that.
Well, actually, you can read the whole chapter, but I'm looking at verse 22. But if they had stopped. I'm sorry, talking about I have not sent these prophets, yet they ran. I have not spoken to them, yet they prophesied. But if they had stood in my counsel and caused my people to hear my words, then they would have turned them from their evil ways and from the evil of their doing. So again, I live with certain regrets of being not on top of things over the years. There were certain periods of time when I was sharper than other times. It was a bit of a checkered past. And so just hearing these words of falsehood, and there's no false motivation in either of our parts. And we've done the best with what was available to us at the time, and now as we get deeper, we're accountable for more, I think, as well. As we learn, we've tested to prove all things, hold on to that which is good, reject the bad. We've done that. That's helped make us who we are. And it's by process of accumulation and elimination. So we can either wind up in a position of being a hoarder, just holding and clinging on to all these different things, some good, some bad, but there's some good things in here. No, don't get rid of this. There's some good stuff still here. And there probably is. But by process of elimination and a process of proper accumulation, and studying the Word and understanding what is being presented and getting a firmer grip on things. There's a lot of things I just kind of nodded my head to in the past, and now I'm being challenged for that because if I'm going to agree with something, I need to know what I'm agreeing to.
That's very,
like a pretty obvious
very
thing.
True. That's very true. What you were saying when Yahuwah points something out to you, watch this, things we agreed or allowed in the past. Okay. Let's take the subject of nakedness. Okay, that'll keep our viewership up a little bit. Okay, that always does good for the ratings. Nakedness. Now, we as believers must confine nakedness to covenant relationships, and so that's one area where, for instance, we're saved, but after we're saved, some folks still look at nakedness, they look at pornography. And that's one of those areas to excuse it because, look, he made us sexual beings, number one. Number two, it's his fault. He's the one who put that desire in our hearts. Number three, we're not hurting anybody because there's no victims. So, for instance, that's one area. Now, let me show you what Yahuwah showed me. Now that I am being, like you said, much is given, to whom much is given, much is required. And I have to be a holy vessel and even a more set-apart vessel because I can't come against the powers of darkness and casting out demons of perversion and lust that are footholds when I am bound by lust and perversion. It won't work, okay? The enemy will just sit there, laugh at me, and will not respond. So, like you were saying, there are certain areas that the Ruach calls us to a higher standard. In other words, if somebody looks at nakedness at home, some ladies like to look at pornography because we always think this is a man problem, but it's not. Some ladies like to look at pornography because they feel abandoned or they feel lonely, and it gives them a quick high and a quick orgasm. Okay, but the problem with that is when the Ruach shows you that that's an open door to very wicked spirits that want to come and destroy your heart and mind. So it's not the 5 minutes that you may or may not be allowed to do, and I don't think you are, but it's the repercussions. So that's like you were saying, when we close the door and we determine not to do that, and we raise ourselves to a higher level of excellence and a higher standard. Because if the word is true, it says I can do all things through the Messiah who strengthens me. So if somebody has a problem with nakedness, pornography outside of marriage, okay, and the human condition is naturally inclined to enjoy watching other people make love. That's just part of being human. We have to overcome that and be a more excellent sacrifice to Yahuwah. But it all starts with desire, okay? It all starts with the desire to be most excellent, you see? Like you were saying, not a desire to be mediocre, not a desire, even pastors watch pornography. Okay, maybe they do, but that doesn't mean we should, and we wouldn't want to be powerless because we live and we wrestle against real flesh and blood and real principalities and powers, and we need to be real with believers, Bob. We can't just come on here every week and talk about, concepts. We got to be real because people get real help from real people, and that's why I make my life an open book. I tell you about my children. I tell you about my past because I know I can help 5 or 6 people who can get a little chokhmah or bina, wisdom and understanding, not to go through those things. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm also aware of the initiation points that should spark something in our minds, which is why Messiah talked about adultery and murder as two things that initiate with the lusting, with the lusting with the eyes, and leading to something greater, as opposed to hating a brother without just cause can lead to murder. The initiation points, we deal with them before they become the main issue, before they become the main event. And that's why I believe another reason he's given us the Spirit in Titus and the grace to say no to these things, to ungodliness, things that are inappropriate for those who are his. And just like we read in Hebrews about we are one with Messiah. And so if we are to be one with Messiah, we need to understand that kind of raises our accountability level. And yeah, I know we need to we are dealing with various issues in our lives and temptations. I still pray against temptations. I don't have everything worked out. It's not a done deal. It's not a closed book. I'm still potentially corruptible. But I pray in the Spirit, and I pray for the strength to overcome, because again, we have all these warnings in these epistles which are written to believers. They are not written to somebody just walking down the street and saying, read this. It's written to believers. This is to different communities of believers. So we need to be aware of these things, but we need to say, to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. We should live soberly and rightly, as you interpret that as Shabbat guarding piety. And we must be so in this age as we look for the blessed hope to come. So for this time, we need to occupy ourselves with meditating on the good things, meditating on things, not just on our weaknesses and shrugging the shoulder when temptations come. We need to develop that defense system that can at least meet them head on and make progress against these things. If we eventually succumb to them, at least we know that we've been in a scrap. Jacob didn't let go until he got that blessing. And the Malach was saying, look, the sun's already up. You can let go now. You lasted through the night. That's it. You can let go. And he said, nothing doing. I'm going to hold on until I get the blessing. The dawn meant nothing to Jacob. Obviously, it didn't mean anything to the Malach because he wasn't going to turn into mist by the rising of the sun. Mm-hmm. But the Malach told him, look, you've already done well. You've wrestled with me all through the night. The sun's up. Let go already. And testing Yaakov saying, no, that's not a signal to me. That's not it's not an indication that the battle's over until I get the blessing. And again, Yaakov got the blessing from his father as well. And he did what he needed to do, and he held on until he got that blessing. And we need to be tenacious. And yeah, we will fail from time to time. Again, not with a shrug of the shoulders saying we are, sloppy agape. We need to move forward and progress. And
Bob,
that's what I tell people with regards to healings too.
Right.
We don't always get the miraculous full healing on the spot, but we pray for difference. We pray for improvement.
Right.
We pray for
something,
even a small iota of change, and it's a sign that we keep going and we keep pursuing that elusive healing or that elusive deliverance. We need to pray for that. We need to get the support, and we need to overcome. We need to be overcomers, more than overcomers, the word says.
Okay, before we close, a couple of things that the Ruach put on my heart. And one is to pray for everybody who has just gone through deliverance, everybody who needs to come forward as a candidate for deliverance. Just because you have a title or you're a leader doesn't mean you don't have areas in your life that you need to live. So I'm gonna ask you to pray for everybody who's gone through deliverance or so forth. But right now I'm gonna open the class to a couple of questions. Now we already have a question from Marjo Falk in Finland. She's a faithful sister. I hope her whole family is listening. And she has this is not just a good question. This is from the Ruach, and I'm gonna show you why. By the way, if you have your questions, Wait till I answer this question, okay? And then you could have a question for myself or Elder Bob. The corn and fig. Corn on the cob and fig. Sometimes I think the corn on the cob tastes better than the figs, at least for me.
It's actually corn on the job.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, I like that. That was good. Corn on the job. Hallelujah. So, since you're on the job, our sister Marjo from Finland says, can a believer do self-deliverance? This is a very... Now, the spiritual principle, Marjo, is no. Because Yahushua was asking sarcastically and rhetorically. What does rhetorical mean? Something that the answer is obvious. He was saying, can a physician heal themselves? Or he was saying, you will say to me, all you who look to me as Maria, you will say to me, physician, heal yourself. Okay? So the spiritual principle is the doctor needs to go to a doctor. Okay. But, and here's the but, it's a very interesting question. Yesterday when I was in the pool, I usually try to swim 3 times a week, either before the class or after the class. And I need that swim to put up with you guys because sometimes you're a pain in the tuchus. Only kidding. But, well, I'm kind of not kidding. Well, whatever. I'm just going to move on. But she says, can a believer deliver themselves? So I was in the pool, and I was going to do a deliverance last night, the second or third in the last week, and I see more coming. And I said, wait a second. There are areas in my life where I know there was an open door, okay, through my dad being abusive in many different ways. And now I know the ruachim that are associated, that come in when that door is open, when they have a legal right. Okay, anger, for instance, or witchcraft, okay. So there are certain ruachim that come in. And so I'm sitting there taking account of what I went through as a child, and I renounced it. I repented of it. I closed the door and I removed any legal right, for instance, that Jezebel and child sacrifice, Molech, sacrificing children's innocence. So I took authority over Molech, I took authority over Jezebel, and all their lessers, such as abuse, abandonment, and I prayed in Yahushua's name that it would be removed from my temple without a deliverance minister. So the answer to your question, from my perspective, is it depends. If you're there's another word that I won't use, it's a 3-letter word. If you're darn sincere about being clean, yes, and you're mature and you're not playing games, and if you were sexually abused, say it. If you were ritually abused, say it. You know, if you were a breeder for a coven to produce babies, to do child sacrifice, even though the cops deny that those things take place, a lot of the missing children are the result of that. That's why the cops never pursue that, okay? Because to them it falls under the category of religion. They rather get the person who raped your grandmother at the bus stop, okay? So, yes, the answer is yes, you can request deliverance for yourself. I believe the answer is yes, under certain conditions and under certain circumstances. I hope that helps you. I hope that helps. Does anybody else have a question? Does anybody, just like you can mikvah yourself, just like you can baptize yourself, right? The Torah doesn't forbid a person from undergoing mikvah. We have a question from Australia. Deb Scheinberg, she's the one that's responsible for giving us the name for this broadcast, Bob, just so you know. So Debs Scheinberg from Australia. So we have Finland and Australia checking in. Corn and fig. But by the way, let me get back to Marjo Falk, okay? If you don't know about spiritual warfare and you haven't studied, unfortunately, the way the kingdom of darkness operates, it may not be wise, okay? Let's say you want to do self-deliverance, but you don't know what ruachim you're dealing with, and you don't know who the strong man is, and you don't know how to determine that thing, okay? Usually I'm still learning myself, because usually in a deliverance, I can tell you who the strong man is in 3 minutes. but I'm learning not to sit there for 2 hours and ask for his name. I tell him and I discern through what I'm going to do from now on is I'm going to discern through the Ruach and call him out. Okay. So I'm always learning. So my only problem that I would have with someone doing deliverance on themselves is they may not know what Ruachim they're dealing with. Okay. Getting back to Debs, where did you get a name like that? Korn and Fig. See that? She's being sarcastic, but we appreciate Debbie and all she does for this ministry. She prays, she gives, she buys CBD, she makes images for free. So without our sister Debbie, she's been following our ministry for, who knows, maybe over 10 years. So what a blessing she is as an extension of Yadi down under. Any other questions before we sign off? The floor is open. Any Bible question, Torah question, child rearing, marriage struggles? We'll wait a few minutes if you have a question. Bob, in the meantime, while we wait for a question, any closing comments?
Well, I'm just encouraged by the people listening and responding, and it shows that people are concerned and people want to learn and people want to be part of something, and it's so good in this age because there's so much isolationism that goes on, and it's a very dangerous position to be in. We really need to be part of the body, and the Kahal Elohim, or the Ecclesia Tuteo, it's one body. It's you belong to some group down the road, and I belong to something in a couple of states over. We're not two different groups. If we're truly following the word, we are basically brothers and sisters of the same thing, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to preach a unified message that reaches into the heights and the depths, reaching the full course of understanding that Yahuwah has made available to us. So this is
right. Now Achoti says, how do you know the names of the Shadim to rebuke them? How do you know how to hear the Ruach for the names of the Shadim or the demons? Okay. I can help you with that off the air. Mariamne, I know you've been talking to Mariamne about that. Basically, there are certain characters, masks that Satan puts up, and they're usually associated with a behavior. For example, rebellion is as a sin of witchcraft, 1 Samuel 15, okay? So when you see rebellion, you see that there's witchcraft. Witchcraft goes back to certain strong men that go back to the Garden of Eden, which would be, for instance, Lilith and Jezebel, okay? So you're dealing with the spirit that appeared in former times as a strong man of Lilith and Jezebel, but they're manifesting through rebellion, your rebellion or rebellion of other people. So you can attach rebellion to those particular spirits, okay? Just to give you an idea of how that works, okay? So, but that we can help you with that off the air. If you tell us what some of the things that you're going through, we can identify the spirits of darkness, and then you can rebuke them and get rid of them in Yahusha's name. But if you really want deliverance, I would suggest working with Mariamne. The self-deliverance does work, but I said they're under certain conditions and under certain circumstances. We have another question. I'm gonna let Elder Bob answer this one from Trinidad. Brother Michael, who listens daily, he's one of my students. Good man. How does a believer, or how would a believer mikvah themselves? How would a believer, or could or how would a believer mikvah themselves? Elder Bob, go ahead.
Okay, well, we see, the traditional approach where we have the minister in the water and people surrounding them and what have you. I believe that as a public proclamation, it's best to do it with somebody there to be a witness to it. But as far as, and I've performed many mikvahs over the years, and I generally, they lean back and I dunk them and they come up. But there's many believe, and I've seen videos and such where the individual kind of just dunks themselves down and comes up with a man or a woman who's around them and what have you. But so I think it's important to have one, not to be completely alone, which I think some people do. They go out to the beach and they just kind of do something, and I think it needs to be a little bit more of a public proclamation than that.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more, and I wanted to define that by agreeing with you that witnesses are required. So, Michael, if you have witnesses, I don't see any reason you cannot mikvah yourself, because the Torah principle is the overriding principle. All things must be done in the mouth or in the eyes of 2 or 3 witnesses. Having said that, it doesn't have to be a reverendo. It doesn't have to be a deacon. It doesn't have to be a denominational bishopric. Okay? Emphasis on the word bishop to keep it clean. So I would agree with Elder Bob to the max that witnesses are more important than someone holding an official title of reverend. Anyone else with a question for Elder Bob or myself? Michael says, thank you, Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Anyone else a question before we get off the air? We'll wait a second. Any question? Go ahead. Don't be shy. We're here to help. Marjo Falk, again, from Finland, asks, I'll let Bob take first crack at it. Are heavenly melachim proper witnesses for a mikvah? That's a good question. Where are you getting all these good questions? I want to drink that finished coffee that you've been drinking.
Actually, does she get charged a lecture for asking another question? Or is it the same flat rate?
Yeah, it's a flat rate, but she's coming up with some dynamite. That shows you that her ruach is hungry and thirsty. So the question was, do we need witnesses at a mikvah or at a tevila, a dunking? And the answer is yes. And dunking, and part of the dunking, the witnesses cannot be donuts. We understand that. When we're talking about doing dunking, donuts are not witnesses. Okay, so Dunkin' Donuts is out of the question. What is in question is what she says, Bob. Are angels proper witnesses? That's a very, very good question. How would you take a crack at it?
Definitely proper witnesses,
yeah.
But I believe just as the assembly above rejoices at the sinner turning from their lifestyle to Yahuwah, so is the witnesses below on the earth, those of the physical brethren, also witnesses as well. So I believe yes to either or. I believe that yes is the proper answer. I believe that during a proper mikvah event that you do have the witnesses above as well as those below, acting in echad, in the agreement and the celebration of a person. The mikvah is the celebration of that person turning away from a sin and into dedication to service. So yeah, I believe that the angels are ecstatic over these events, but not exclusively. I believe that there needs to be mishpacha, physical family of those of the community that you decide to attend with. But certainly, I believe that both are equally relevant.
All right, Deb, I agree. That's a good answer. Deb from Australia says, how can you have witnesses around you if they don't witness as you do? That's the hard part. Oh, I think she's saying if they don't have the same witness of Torah and kashrut and keeping the feast. In other words, she's saying, I think she is saying, correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm isolated and I want to have witnesses who believe the way I do correctly, and there's no one around here, who would my witnesses be? How would you answer that, Elder Bob? If she has no ability to produce.
If you're learning of the Lord sort of in an isolation bubble and the rest around you are not of the same ilk, I would also assume that you're not, or the person is not attending a certain community of believers.
But she does. She attends.
divorced.
She attends with us through video. She doesn't have other Torah keepers around her that could be a witness to such a thing.
Now, how about possibly doing something through Skype, or where the brethren can
monitor
witness with each other and behold the event, because I think it is important that we're on the same page. You know, you don't want to be immersed with a bunch of Jehovah's Witnesses necessarily, or you know, people of a completely different faith, because they wouldn't understand what you're doing. You know, to be immersed in the mikvah in Mashiach is to take on his mantle, and the fullness of understanding is tied in with the derech emunah, with the way of truth, the way of faith. And if we don't have that full support of people of like mind who are part of the body, then I don't think it's necessarily a valid witness.
Right. So that's a very good idea, Deb. If you'd want, we can do it a Skype or some kind of video arrangement where you can have someone hold a smartphone or whatever, and we, the elders here, can witness your mikvah, and we could even, you know, pronounce the blessing. That's a very good idea. That's a very good idea. Okay, one more. This is the last one, because we have to go to the bank and deposit our millions of dollars that we've been fleecing the flock with. Allison says, so this will be the last one, okay?
After, do I get my cut?
Yeah, you get 10%, Bob, of course, but you don't have to tell you don't got to tell everybody our business.
All right. Yeah, you're right.
All right. After the first session of deliverance service, how do you handle the dust in your spiritual body after the first spiritual cleansing, when you have removed the junk? Okay. So do you mean dust or things that remain, Allison? You're talking about things that still haven't been dealt with? In other words, what exactly has remained that you're talking about dealing with? Okay, I would have to give you a good answer, I would have to be a little bit more specific. So what is the dust in your spiritual body after the first spiritual cleaning? Try to be a little bit more specific if you can. I mean, basically, whatever is not pleasing to you, or whatever is still afflicting you, whatever voices you may be hearing that contradict the word of Yahweh. It's only a doorbell, and it's only a fire alarm that session number 2 or number 3 may be needed, regardless of the manifestations, whether they're voices or things that don't line up with the word of Yahuwah. Those are doorbells that further deliverance is needed. Yes, right. When things are still there. That's right. Things don't. Not everything comes to the surface. Okay, there's some strongholds that come to the surface or sacrificed, and then there are some strong men who stay back. Okay, for instance, we were dealing with a deliverance where Ahab was put on the altar, and Ahab was sent to take the brunt. Okay, and behind the Ahab was Jezebel, just Jezzy sitting there hiding. Okay, so a lot of times the strong man is a sacrifice because they're scrambled, and the Ruachim are all scrambled, and they're looking to see who can betray the other and put a strong man out there so that they can go into hiding. Okay, so that's what happens a lot of the times, that you get one or two strong men, but the other one, they become sacrifices. Now there's division in the camp, and the strongest is still hiding. Okay, so that explains why sometimes you need further deliverance, so that all these strong men can come to the surface. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. Thank you. That's what I mean. Ruach HaKodesh, Allison says, is still revealing other things. Excellent. And those are the things that will be addressed. Because like Joe Louis said, the brown bomber in boxing, you can run, but you can't hide. So, Baruch Hashem Yahuwah. Again, friends, thank you for being with us on this Prep Yom Shishi. We'll see you on Shabbat tomorrow. We gather in Mikra Kodesh with the angels above and the angels below at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Shalom, shalom.